There are very few topics in the field of personal finance that are more controversial than the whole rent versus buying dilemma. Both have pros and cons that we can't simply ignore. So when I thought of buying an apartment, I decided to invite my brothers for a friendly discussion to know which one is the better choice. One brother has been living in a rented place for the last decade and the other one is a proud apartment owner. So we will hear the arguments first and at the end I will give you my take on this. For most of us, buying an apartment or a house would be the most important financial decision we ever take in our life, and if it makes sense to spend 10 minutes to avoid any future regrets, then keep watching. Wait. Let's start. This discussion itself is unnecessary. We all know the answer to this. Buying an apartment is ultimately an investment decision, but when you pay the rent, you are just throwing away money. Instead, when you own, you can use the same rent to pay the property price and then finally end up having the apartment. Not that easy, bro. Historically, house prices tend to appreciate, whereas you don't get anything back from renting. But the property price is just one part of the total cost. What about the sunk cost and the running costs? Even if we can recover the property price through value appreciation, there are certain upfront costs associated with owning an apartment that we can never get back. Those are the sunk costs, and in Germany, basically there are 4 types, but they should be more or less similar in every other country. The first is property tax or Grundwerbsteuer, which comes to around 3.5 to 6.5% of the property price. Basically, it's a tax that we need to pay to the government when we buy a property. Then comes the notary's fees of around 1.2 to 1.5%, and according to German law, it is mandatory to hire a notary or solicitor to handle the legal work related to buying a property. Then there is a fee for registering the property, which comes to around 0.5 to 1%. Then there is a commission we pay to a broker or a real estate agency to find the apartment. Generally, brokerage fees range from 3% to 7% of the purchase price. These numbers can slightly differ from state to state, but on average, you will spend about 10 to 15% of the purchase price on sunk costs that you won't get back. And you need to find a way to finance this sunk cost because banks normally doesn't consider this as a part of the mortgage. Yeah, I know we have this additional cost, but if you don't have the money yourself, you can always finance it from the bank as a personal loan. At what cost? The interest rate for personal loans are always more. Even if you can finance the sunk cost, what about the down payment of the apartment? Most banks demand an upfront payment of 10 to 20% of the property price. So you are saying I have to find by myself 20 to 25% of the property cost even before owning the property? Exactly. Wait, people are not that financially illiterate. Most of them would have some savings with them, and if that's not enough, they can always take some personal loan from the bank. But the most important thing you have to consider is that once you own the apartment, you don't have to pay the rent anymore. And that's thousands of euros in savings every month. I agree. There is no rent anymore. But we can't forget the running costs. Instead of rent, now you have a fixed monthly payment to the bank along with the interest. And this could be more than your current rent depending on your repayment rate. Also, being an house owner means you're responsible for the regular upkeep of your property. Weatherproofing may have to be upgraded. Your heating system can malfunction. The house needs to be repainted. Ideally, every house owner should budget about 1% of the property price for repair and maintenance costs. But I can check all this before buying the apartment. That's why I spend money on an appraiser to inspect the property and identify such issues. Look, there are some problems that even an expert can't identify easily. For example, in Germany, there is a legal obligation for the house owner to maintain the drainage line from the house to the main drainage. And if something goes wrong, a repair can cost on average around 2,000 to 4,000 euros. For an old property, maybe yes. But if I buy a brand new apartment, then I might not have to spend this much amount in maintenance costs. Even then, you still need to cut the trees, maintain the garden and move the lawn. And what about the additional expenses that come along with the lifestyle upgrade? Can you tell me which dining table you had when you were staying for rent and how much did it cost then? I think it was a used IKEA dining table that I bought for around 100 euros. Why? I will tell you, but do you use the same one in the home you currently own? No. When I moved in, I bought a new one from Segmuller for 1,000 euros. And does the food taste better with the new one? What has dining table anything to do with the taste of the food? I know. My point is, now since you own the place, the old IKEA furniture doesn't seem to be enough. It's not for me to judge how much of value a 1,000 euro dining table can bring to your life. When you buy a house, your whole attitude towards spending changes. We start to compare everything with the price of the apartment. When you look at the 1,000 euro dining table through the lens of a 500,000 euro apartment, then suddenly it becomes reasonable, right? I love my new dining table. That's all I have to say. And I'm not denying that, but all this takes money away, adding to your opportunity cost. Okay, wait. I understood the sunk cost. I understood the running cost. Are you saying there is more? Yes, and this is something most people don't even think about. These are the potential benefits that we miss out by choosing one investment over another. We all know that buying a house involves spending a considerable amount of money upfront and then being financially committed for a long period of time. There could be many other things which we could have done with that same amount of money that may add more value and happiness to our life. For example, you could have used the money to travel around or to start a business. Instead, by spending that money on the house, you are missing out on all the other things that you could have done with that money. You are just trying to scare people away with all these complicated terms. I'm pretty sure that renting involves a lot of cost. Not exactly. All I have to pay is the cold rent, which is the cart meter, and the cost for the utilities called the Nebenkosten. And I don't have any surprise expenses because I know how much the housing costs each month. Also, I have very low maintenance cost, if not zero, because upkeep is technically the job of the landlord. If the toilet starts to leak or the doors don't close, I just have to call the landlord and ask them to handle the situation. Okay, enough of all the talk. I'm going to prove to you that buying makes more sense financially. Let me get my laptop and show you the numbers. And the numbers don't lie. So for this, I am going to use the online calculator from test.de, and for reference, I will take the property prices in Munich. So the current average price for an apartment in Munich is around 9,000 euro per square meter. So for a 100 meter square Wohnung, this comes to about 90,000 euros. So now let's add all the Nebenkosten like the property tax, the broker fees, etc., which will come to around 10% of the purchase price. And then the yearly maintenance cost of around 1%. So we will also assume an increase in the maintenance cost by 1.5% yearly. Do you know the current average rental prices in Munich? I think it's around 17 euro per square meter. So that will come to around 20,000 euros per year for a similar apartment. So now we need to fill the estimated yearly increase in the purchase and the rental price. On average, the value of an apartment in Germany has been increasing at a rate of 5% in the last decade. And let's assume a yearly 1% increase in the rental cost. The Baukindergeld is the financial subsidies given by the state to families with children. So for simplicity, let's ignore this for now. And for the mortgage details, we assume we can put a 10% down payment on the loan, the current interest rate, which is around 3%, and then the monthly repayment rate. Let's keep it 2% or around 1,500 euros per month. Now we have to enter the details of alternative investment options, which we can do with the same amount of money. So could you tell me where you would be investing your money in case you are not buying an apartment, and what would be the probable growth rate for it? I have invested most of my money on the S&P 500 ETF, and that has grown at an average rate of 10% annually. But let's be on the conservative side and put a value of 8%. So I'll enter these values. Now the tax is the capital gain tax, which is around 25%, and let's keep the married option as it is. And so now let's click on calculate and see which does better. See, there is definitely an advantage for the buyer. After 10 years, we do better than you by an amount of 161,000 euros, and as the time goes by, it just gets better. But you can also see that for the first 3 years, the disadvantage is with the buyer, and it takes at least 4 years to just break even. I agree that buying builds you more capital in the long run, but it's not that much of a massive difference as everyone believes it is. And life, it's not just about some numbers. You also have to consider the psychological factors in the equation. It's a lot challenging to estimate this side, but it's very important that we consider this. By owning your place, you add on to your responsibilities that can lead to more stress. If something breaks, you may have to fix it yourself. I can just call my landlord and ask them to take care of it. But then you have to ask the same landlord for permission if you want to do some changes in the apartment, right? Since I own my place, I have the freedom to redo it to meet my taste and needs. And if I want to change the color of the walls to red, I can do it without asking any permission. Okay, this is only partially accurate. It's true that the purchase eliminates the dependency with the landlord, but then the bank, the neighbors, and the municipality normally takes the landlord's place. For example, is it possible for you to repaint the outer walls of the apartment if your apartment is part of a building with many apartments? No, you have to get the permission from your neighbors. To install a playhouse in your own garden, you may have to get a permit from the municipality. It's not as easy as it sounds. You won't understand. You will never know how it feels to live in your own place. There is a sense of stability and a pride of ownership that you will never get from a rented apartment. And in case if I'm not happy with the purchase, I always have the option to sell it and then move back. But then you lose most of the financial benefits that you mentioned earlier. There may be penalties from the bank for closing the loan early. In any case, buying a house or an apartment is a huge financial commitment that can last for years. Since I live in a rented place, I have the flexibility to move according to my needs. Basically, I'm not tied down to the property. So if I want, I can take up a job in another area, move to a different community, or just take a space with better amenities. For someone who values the freedom, renting is always the better option. Freedom. Who are you, Mahatma Gandhi? Who are you to talk about stability? The United Nations? Okay, stop. I'm trying to get some new followers here, not to scare away the followers I already have. I've heard enough from both of you, now you both can leave. Honestly, after hearing the arguments from both sides, my take is this. When it comes to a primary residence, it's a personal choice as to whether to rent or to buy, because both have pros and cons. Ignore all the people who tell you that owning makes more sense in the long run and renting is just throwing away money. Life circumstances and housing markets are too complicated to make blanket statements like that. Ultimately, you will have to think about what your goals are, not just where you live, but the entire financial picture. For me personally, I have a lot of things going on right now with the YouTube channel and with work. So I don't want to get involved in more complications of owning a place that can probably take a large share of my time. And also, I'm not exactly sure about where I'll be or what I'll be doing after 5 years. So even though I know it makes sense to buy an apartment considering the long term, and I do have the means to do so, I'm still renting a place. But I am making up for that by investing heavily in the stock market, where I can get an average 8% return. And if you also want to invest and grow your money, then you can check this video where I explain how to start your stock market investment from Germany. I hope this video helped you to think from a different perspective about the whole rent versus buying debate. There is no right or wrong here. Ultimately, it all comes down to our happiness and what we want from our life. Thanks for watching, and until I see you again, adios.